with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the crowded Mattress Studios in the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the city of Boston. We are so excited and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Marie Tang. She is here to celebrate Yuna's cardboard castles. Before we invite Marie into the studio, we want to invite everybody to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. If you are a parent or a teacher, please be sure to check out our blog, our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Wall of Fame, and also sign up for our free online magazine. If you are an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to learn how you can be a guest here on the podcast, and also learn how you can submit your book to our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read panel. If they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of really, really powerful tools that can help your book stand out from the crowd of books that are published every single month. You probably never realized when you sat down to write your debut children's book that there are literally thousands of books published every single month. You heard me right. Every single month, there are thousands of books published. It is hard to stand out from that crowd of books, even when you are published by the biggest, most gigantinous publisher in the world. And if you're a self-published author, it's even harder. We would love to help you out. Check it out today. Go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and scroll on down to Certified Great Reads. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Charlotte in North Carolina. Our guest is here today to celebrate her debut picture book. It's called Yuna's Cardboard Castle. Please welcome to the show, Marie Tang. Hey, Marie, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Jed.
I am so excited to have you on. You know, celebrating a debut book, whether it's a picture book, a middle grade novel, a YA title, any kind of a book, it's kind of like helping somebody celebrate the birth of their first child.
Yeah, it is. I'm really excited about this, and I'm hoping it's the start of a long picture book writing career.
Well, let's tell everybody what Yuna's Cardboard Castle is all about.
So Yuna's Cardboard Castles is a little bit about my story. It's about a young girl who moves to a new country. She doesn't speak the language in that new country, but she can do something very special with paper, which is origami. So she knows origami, and she uses origami to sort of make these creations and share them with the neighborhood kids. Now, at first, they ignore her. Of course, she doesn't speak the language, so she can't explain what she's making. But as the story progresses, she befriends someone in the neighborhood and is able to share her gift with everyone.
Yeah. You know, as you're talking about that, and I have different memories. I was sharing with Marie that we've hosted kids here in our home from a number of different countries. Most of the kids who came and joined us had a pretty strong grasp on English when they arrived. But there are a number of times where we hosted kids or did activities with kids, young people, who had little to no English language abilities. And when you're in those situations, at first, it can be very uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And your first initial thought is, how in the world can we develop a relationship with this person? But I think if you remember the last word of that last sentence that you're dealing with a person.
Yep.
When you realize that, it's a lot easier to find a way to make a connection.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this story. That's the idea that through the language of play, especially when it's, amongst children, but even with adults, we can find ways to connect, to laugh, and to just find joy in play.
Yeah.
Even when we don't speak the language yet.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're speaking, you have this through the magic of technology. I'm able to look into Marie's home or studio, and I can see she has this big smile as she's talking, not only about her book, but about making these connections. And I think more than anything else, it's that smile that that opens the door to somebody's heart, that makes it possible for us to make a connection with somebody that we don't obviously share things or a lot of things with.
You're right. And that's a good point, never underestimate a smile. I've been a teacher for many years, working mostly with young kids, early childhood, preschool to kindergarten age. And right now I'm volunteering at a senior center. And the one thing I hear the most from both ends of the spectrum is how important a smile is to them. At the end of the day, a friendly face goes a long way.
Yeah. My initial thought as we were speaking was to share a little story about a time when I was working in helping to run an after-school program, and it was a big agency. We had an after-school program, different levels of daycare. And there was this little girl from Russia who moved to the United States, and she was in the daycare next to the space where my after-school program was, and she spoke no English at all, but her and I made this really wonderful connection through smiles.
Oh.
And it was beautiful. But then I thought that there are probably a lot more families that are listening to the show that are going to experience a moment in their lives where somebody that they love is going to lose their ability to speak or to understand due to dementia or Alzheimer's, or and they become elderly, and they find themselves with this loved one who's now in a nursing home. And how are we going to communicate? How am I going to help my kids communicate with this person that they love so much?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of families don't even try because it's just too daunting.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited for this, but next month I'm going to be reading Yuna's Cardboard Castles at the Senior Center because there's an element of origami, and we're interested in allowing them to have some hands-on crafting time. And also, like you said, it does get hard as we age, and you never know what could change about your personality and physically what you can and can't do. But it's that language of play. It still exists, being able to touch someone, hold their hand, smile at them. What we're going to do is we're going to read, so I get to share my voice, share the story with them, and then we get to experience it by doing a little bit of origami.
Yeah. And, when I think of origami, I think the first nation I think of is Japan.
Yes.
Is origami something that is shared by many different countries in Asia?
Yeah, I think the art of paper folding is, of course, it comes from Japan. It originates in Japan. A lot of people have used origami in other cultures. Again, paper folding for many reasons, for writing letters, for sending letters, for art pieces. And now the exciting thing, this was really exciting for me to see. It was on the cover of National Geographic, I think not this past issue, but the issue before, that NASA's using it in space. So NASA has been folding these, they call it a sun shield. The only way to get this sun shield up into space was to make it compact. So they're using the techniques of origami to fold it up into a reasonable size, send it up into space where it would open up, be a sunshade so that they could use it to block some light so they can see other planets or something along those lines. And then in the article, it also talked about how origami was used on a micro level too. They're trying to make little origami, microscopic origami robots that could go into our bodies and help us with, ail us.
That is fascinating and creepy.
Yes. I was really excited to hear about that. I was like, "Whoa, this is great." And it is a little bit creepy.
Yeah, this idea that there is
little robots
crawling around inside your veins.
Yeah.
It's like, at the moment I am recovering from a surgery, and it's like, yeah, if I could throw some robots in there and they could help everything come back together a little bit quicker, I'm all for that. But it's like, how are we going to get them out? It could be like water.
If you read the article, when I say microscopic, I'm like really microscopic. They said in a pinpoint, they could fit 1,000 of those in you. Yeah. I don't know how it works, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how do they even see something that small?
Right. Exactly.
This is crazy. Well, but I think, and I don't know if this is going to be a stretch, but I really think that the scientists that are working together to create these, whether it's the teeny weeny microscopic origami robots or the giant sunscreens that need to be folded up to get into space, all that imagining really kind of starts when we're reading with our kids and we're helping them imagine different things that are going on, and we're empowering them by asking them simple questions about what do you think is going on in the story, and how do you feel when you hear that, and what do you think Yumi should do next?
I couldn't agree more. This is a huge topic for me that I advocate to parents all the time. I spent some time in China where at an international school where we had very well-off, educated families. One of the things that was very important to them was getting their children to read in English. A lot of them, and I'm talking 4 and 5-year-olds, would go to language classes, learn how to read. One story that really stuck out to me was when I was in the library with a little girl named Charlotte. She was only about 5 years old. We started reading a book together. She was reading the sentences, and I said, okay, let's talk about it. Tell me, what is grandma doing in the picture? And she was confused. She didn't know what I said. So I said, okay, let me try again. Let me ask her in a different way. Can you show me where grandma is? And, let's talk about grandma in the picture. So she was still confused. What I realized was that she read the words on the page, but she couldn't connect that grandma was the person in the picture. Now this is because over there they're drilled to learn how to read the words. But without a parent talking to you and looking at the book with you and reading the story and talking about the story, you're missing a lot of context, and you don't really understand the vocabulary, even though you can read the words. Mm-hmm. So, for me, reading aloud with your kids, but also reading in such a way that makes it enjoyable, entertaining, fun, not pressure filled is really, really important, especially at a young age.
Yeah. It's interesting. My wife is a retired special needs teacher, and one of the I think one of the most frustrating things she had to deal with from time to time was sitting down with the parent and explaining to the parent that their child wasn't reading, and the parent would say, no, you're wrong, and would hand a book to the child, and the child would be able to go and read every single word, but they had merely memorized the words. They weren't getting the context. They had absolutely no comprehension.
Yep.
And it was hard for those parents who wanted their kids to succeed to understand, no, there are a couple of things going on. Reading and recognizing the words is one thing, but making a connection between the words and what the words are trying to say, that is as important, if not more important.
Yeah, and the story as a whole, what that story means and what we're trying to gather from the beginning, middle, and end of the story, what conclusions we come up with, what alternate endings we could have. These are all things that expand a child's mind.
Yeah. One of the things you were sharing with Marie is your interesting life story. You shared with me that you were born in Hong Kong, but you grew up here in the United States, and then you moved back to China, to Shanghai for, I think it was 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because while you were born in China, you didn't grow up Chinese. You grew up American.
Yeah.
What was that like, going back and living in a different culture that that you were born into but you weren't raised in?
That's a great question. I think maybe we hear it a lot, right, from Asian Americans, but I grew up American. When you come to this country and you're young, you automatically, you want to disassociate. At least in my time, I wanted to disassociate with my culture because I wanted to fit in. I didn't realize until much later in life that how important my culture was to me, to getting to connect with my family, to growing just as a person and becoming who I am now. When I went to China, I remember the first year and a half, I was rejecting everything. I didn't want to be part of any of it. I wanted to be back in America. I wanted to have my American things. I didn't speak the language either. So again, Yuna's Cardboard Castles goes both ways for me, because I didn't speak Mandarin going to China. So I speak a little bit of Cantonese because my family's from Hong Kong, but Mandarin was pretty much new to me and I had to learn. But after some time, I started to realize how beautiful so many aspects of the culture are. Different ways of seeing food, different ways of seeing family, different ideas on education. And at the end of it, I miss it so much. I miss China a lot. I'm happy to be here. There's so many great opportunities in America, but it was truly a wonderful experience.
Yeah. I think it's so very important to help our kids understand that that we are part of this big, beautiful, diverse world, and that you can love where you're from, you can love your home culture and the unique parts about it, but being able to open up your mind to meet people from different cultures, to experience things from different cultures, I think it's important, but I also think it's a really wonderful gift we can give to our kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We ended up staying there. We didn't think we would stay that long. My daughter ended up growing up. She grew up there. So we went when she was 18 months, we moved to China. When we left, she was almost 13. So she is fluent in Mandarin and English. She can read and write in Mandarin, she has this whole cultural experience that is just, from my perspective, I just think it's so cool. And she's a teenager now, but one day she will think it's cool too. I always tell families, if you have the opportunity, do it. Go experience it. It might be uncomfortable at first, because new things are uncomfortable sometimes, but you'll learn so much and you'll have really great memories to take away from it.
Yeah. I want to talk about something else you shared with me. You were speaking about teaching last year, coming back to America and teaching in a very unique school where we hear of dual language schools, but you were teaching in a school where there were 4 different languages being taught and simultaneously. Can you talk a little bit about how that works and if it works?
Absolutely. I love this concept. It is a startup. I was only there for a year because I wanted to kind of move on and try writing as a career full time. And I am fortunate to have that opportunity. But it was a multi-language immersion school, working in the Montessori Reggio sort of teaching space. Multi-language immersion, meaning the children would experience 4 languages, would learn in 4 different languages throughout the day, every day. Those languages were the top 4 spoken in the world: Spanish, English, Mandarin, and Arabic. See, these are the top 4 languages spoken in the world. Each day, their class would spend an hour or a little bit more in each language. The teacher would completely, they would completely be immersed. There was no English in that room. When they were in the Spanish room, everything was taught in Spanish. All of the materials were in Spanish. Then they would move to their Mandarin classroom. It would be the same theme. They might have a slightly different lesson, but it would be along the same lines. But everything would be in Mandarin, including everything on the wall, pictures on the wall. The teacher, the assistant teacher, anyone who came in was not supposed to speak English. They had to speak in that language. And if they didn't, they would have to have a conversation later. So the idea was that these children would be immersed and they would hear the language every day. So did it work? It did. It was crazy to see this work, because I'm talking about, we started at 2 years old. The youngest were 2. And we'd have parents come in and say like, oh, so-and-so said this. Does this mean anything? I was like, yeah, they were telling you in Mandarin that, their brother wasn't ready for school or something, or was late. So they would mix the languages, but they were using it. So at that age, they couldn't say, they would say one sentence in 2 different languages, for example. Now, some parents and some people think that that's a bad thing, that they're getting confused or mixed up. But, I'm trying to refresh I used to do the tours. I was an administrator, so I used to tell people this all day long. Now I'm trying to remember. It doesn't take away from anything. If anything, it broadens brain development. It helps make more connections to not only to the world, because, mind you, they're interacting with native speakers every day. We had teachers from all over come to the school to teach. And it just made them, it was just amazing to watch them develop and grasp this vocabulary and grasp learning. Again, it was Montessori Reggio, so a lot of it was through play. And that's really how they learn.
Yeah. I've mentioned here on the podcast that my kids grew up in a bicultural home. My beautiful wife's family is originally from Puerto Rico, and especially with my son, he grew up speaking both English and Spanish and Spanglish a lot of time. A lot of his sentences would be in Spanglish, and you know, I want leche, you know, yo quiero water, and there's oh my goodness, he's 3, and his, you know, the 3-year-old next door is speaking perfect 3-year-old English, but my son is mixing them all up. He knows twice the vocabulary as his, you know, his peer. So
yeah,
there is an advantage, and
absolutely. How cool is that? I had somebody come in once, and I'm so excited. I always get really excited talking about this, but a man came in and he said, you know, there's no word for this thing that I was trying to explain. There's no word for it in English, so I can only say it in my language. And like you just said, you have a broader vocabulary because you speak multiple languages. I think it's so cool.
And I don't know, you can help me if you feel this way. I toured Puerto Rico for a number of years doing my educational magic show, and while I never became fluent, I memorized most of my show, or I'd go on stage with a vocabulary of 300 or 400 words, and I wasn't afraid to make a mistake in Spanish on stage because I was a clown and it was funny. Yeah. As long as I didn't make that big mistake. But I found, especially when I was touring and I was by myself and traveling around the island by myself and trying to think in Spanish, I was thinking in a different way. Those words were causing me to see the world in a slightly different way. Is that something that you experienced? You know, that the fact that your brain can be thinking in different languages helps you see the world differently?
Definitely. And I just think isn't that a cool ability to have? To be able to see different perspectives and to, you know, be sensitive to it. I think it's really amazing.
Yeah. You know, one thing I just want to kind of touch on, before we end our conversation here, we're talking, and this is going to be released during Asian American,
yes, AAPI.
Yes.
Great.
All these different combinations of letters.
So many acronyms.
But, I think it's important, and we kind of touched on it here today. We're talking about Asia, and we're talking about origami, and that it originated in Japan, but it was shared by many different Asian countries. And you were speaking about being born in Hong Kong, and learning Cantonese, so that when you returned and you weren't fluent in Mandarin. And so we're understanding that, yeah, there are these different countries in Asia, and yeah, even in a country like China, there's different languages being spoken. I think it's really important for everybody to remember that when you use the word Asian, that's just a word that describes a person whose family might have come from one corner of the world. It doesn't define their culture or their language or anything else, because Asia is this umbrella that encompasses all different cultures, languages, perspectives, and I think that more than anything during this month is something we should help our kids understand, that a label, you know, while it might help you in some ways, you don't let a label limit your perception of a person.
That's right. Even in America, right? When I'm living in the South now, and sometimes, you know, that language is different. I visited South Carolina a while back, and they were saying how they have words that only they use there in Charleston, you know, because it was historic. They're historic, phrases for things, and they only use them there. But you're absolutely right. I was living in Shanghai, and in Shanghai, they speak Mandarin. Everyone speaks Mandarin, but they also speak Shanghainese, which is a whole other dialect that I did not get at all. But, it was really interesting to see how many, even in China, like you said, how many different dialects, how many different dumplings. We were talking about dumplings earlier. Mm-hmm. The North makes different dumplings than in the South, you know. They make, just open your mind to it is what I would say. Open your mind to all different cultures. We tend to stick with what's familiar because it's easy. But if I could tell parents anything, it would be that in early childhood, when your children are young, their brains are so open. Don't limit them. We might be limited as adults, but your children, they're ready and willing and happy to experience the world and see what's out there. So allow them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think, Marie, one way we can help our kids, because you're right, the familiar is easy and it's much more comfortable. Mm-hmm. I think one way we can help our kids become familiar with folks from different cultures to help them feel more comfortable is to introduce them to different peoples and cultures through books.
Yes.
When we have a character like Yuna in our homes, Yuna becomes part of our family.
Yes, she does.
Yeah.
I hope that everyone can, look at this and have a conversation with their children about it. That's been the best gift I've been given when parents come back and say, oh, my child can really relate to this. They came to this country and didn't speak the language. So they, read the book, and through the beautiful illustrations by Jia-Ting Chen, they were able to point out things in there that they could relate to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even though they weren't from Japan or Asia or wherever, He said, oh, I know that. The boxes, I remember moving and coming here and seeing all those boxes and being sad when the kids didn't want to play with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, Marie, we need to find out where we can go to find out more about you and find out more about Yuna's cardboard castles.
Yeah, great. So you can visit me at www.marie-tang.com. And there you can see my bio, see some upcoming books that I have, and connect to Instagram.
Wonderful. We've had this has really been a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I had a great time.
Yeah, we've been celebrating the debut picture book from our guest, Marie Tang. The name of her book is Yuna's Cardboard Castles. Hey, Marie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jed. I really had a wonderful time.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Please be sure to check out Marie's beautiful book, Yuna's Cardboard Castles. Want to thank the folks who helped make today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guest, Marie Tang. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Jordan Saley, Cassandra Masonet, Stephanie Davila, Will Cheever. Want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.